So I just wanted to share a few moments in time that affected me as a person, as an educator, and the person I am today. So I was a first-generation college student, right? Barely graduated high school, raised by a single parent. So no one taught me what to expect in college, what is expected of me in college. So I went to a community college, and like most people my age in my neighborhood, I worked 3 or 4 jobs at the same time while attending community college. I took care of my mother and my siblings, and one of the jobs that I had was this overnight security job. So I had to do this overnight shift security job and then go to school right afterwards. And if you know anything about security jobs for like 19-year-olds, they don't give you a gun and a badge, right? They give you a flashlight and they give you this little baton, right? It looks like the cheerleader thing more than the actual weapon. So in the middle of the night, I used to work I think it was like 11 p.m. and I would get off at 7 a.m. And then I had an hour bus ride to get to the community college and had a class at 8:30 or 9 a.m. class, right? So my class was Mr. Nicholas Poulis, human service class, early in the morning. He was also my academic advisor, right? So when I came into class, I thought the smartest thing I could do was sit in the front row like this. Because I figure if I sit in the front row, I won't fall asleep because I haven't slept yet. Right? Oh, thank you. Forgot my glasses, and I could see you. So I sat in the front row, figuring I'm not going to fall asleep, right? This is me. This is my table. Sat in the front row. Within seconds, pow, fell asleep, right? I don't know how long I slept, but then my spidey senses started kicking in. It was like, Emad, you need to wake up. Emad, you should get up right now. Something's happening around you. You need to get up. So I got up, and no lie, my table, there was a pile of drool. And the drool had created a waterfall. And there was like a lake of drool, and it was like going towards other students who had moved their legs to get away from it. So I got up, I wiped the drool off my face, and I went towards the back of the classroom and went back to sleep. Then the class ended, and as I'm walking out, my classmates stopped me. And they were like, do you know what happened in the middle of the class? And I was like, nah, I was sleeping. Like, no. You snored so loud, Nicholas stopped his class. And then you snored again, and Nicholas got up off his podium, went towards your table, and looked down at you. But then he said something amazing. He said something incredible. He pointed at me and he goes, let him sleep. He said, he's here. That says a lot. See, Nicholas knew my story, right? He was not only my teacher, he was my academic advisor, and he knew I was struggling with a lot of things. You see, I'm a genocide survivor. I was born in a concentration camp in the killing fields of Cambodia. On the day I was born, my father was being tortured and eventually executed. I also had an older brother that died of starvation in my mother's arms. My mother eventually escaped the concentration camp and ended up in a refugee camp in Thailand. Now, the refugee camp was almost as bad as the concentration camp because this was a lawless environment, right? This was an environment where women were being taken advantage of. Kids sometimes disappear. Men would go look for work and never come back. But one of the beautiful things about this experience in the refugee camp, new families start developing. the recreation of new families started appearing, and all of a sudden, my mother, my single mother, started adopting kids, right? Kids that lost their parents, and all of a sudden, I went from a single child. I had an uncle that she adopted who was about 16, right? All of a sudden, she adopted another person, and she became my older sister. And then she met my stepfather, and my stepfather and her had a baby, and that became my sister, right? And one of the great things about having an intact family, you're more likely to get sponsored to come to America, right? Which we did. And my mom said, instead of people in the refugee camp becoming jealous, right, they celebrated with her. They were excited for her because to them it was an opportunity that they may one day have too. We all know the stories of refugees coming to America, and they find their way. They these motivational, passionate stories of people overcoming a lot of obstacles. But the one thing we don't talk about is the journey to get to America. And then once you're in America, what happens before you reach that level of success, right? Because they didn't put us anywhere in America, right? They don't talk about that. They didn't put us in the suburbs of Atlanta, right? They put us in Brooklyn, New York in the 80s, right? So if you don't know Brooklyn in the 80s, listen. Beyonce didn't live in Brooklyn in the 80s. There was no food co-ops in the 80s. There was nobody walking their little dogs, no one doing yoga in the streets in the 80s. And I grew up in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, right? Sunset Park, Brooklyn in the 80s was the height of the crack epidemic. This is when gangs were all over the place. This is when the Bronx were being burnt down. And the one thing that I could look forward to was breakdancing, right? Because I was this little Cambodian kid, and I was like, oh, snap, who wants some? You want some? Right? But this is before, MP3s. This is before, iPads, iPhones. This is when we had a cassette tape, right? And I had Michael Jackson. I didn't have Curtis Blow. I didn't have Run DMC. I had Michael Jackson Beat It. And I would walk around saying, can you play my cassette tape? Can you play my cassette tape? And they're like, no. Sunset Park, Brooklyn, 61st Street. It was diverse, but very segregated at the same time. We had Haitians, Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, and it seemed like no one got along. But the most amazing thing I remember was the block parties. The block parties were awesome, right? This was like a Spike Lee movie. This is when all these different ethnicities actually came into this, what we call melting pot or salad bowl, because instead of fighting over territory, instead of fighting over ethnicity, they fought over the beauty of their culture, right? It was about whose barbecue was better, right? Whose music is better? Is it merengue? Is it salsa, right? All of a sudden, everyone was celebrating who they were and what made them special. And I remember the basketballs came out, hopscotch, right? And the one thing that I waited for the entire year was when the fire hydrant came on, because I can't swim. I can't swim today. I would drown if I had to swim. But the closest thing to swimming to me was when the fire hydrant came on, and the only thing we had left was our tighty-whities and some flip-flops, and I was swimming like a beast. It was amazing, right? One day, I was having such an amazing time swimming in the fire hydrant. I had lost track of time. I didn't realize the environment around me had changed. The music had stopped and was replaced with cars honking. The laughter had stopped and was replaced with screamings. And my friends disappeared. And everything became chaotic. And all I could see was people screaming and running, and I became afraid. So I was trying to get to my housing unit and trying to get to my doorway. But there was a group of guys standing in front of it. They were standing in front of the stoop. and I was trying to get past them. But as I got closer, I could see that their whole body language was changing, and they were pointing at each other, and they were screaming at each other. And I got close, and I was trying to get around them, and I could see them pushing each other. And as I got close, all I heard was bang! And there was this loud ringing in my ear, extremely loud ringing in my ear, and I could smell smoke. It felt like something was burning. And all I could feel was pain on the left side of my face. All I could feel was pain on my arms, and I was trying to get away from this situation. And across the street, this doorway opened up, and this Puerto Rican man stuck his head out, and he's like, mira man aquí, and he's calling me towards him. And as I'm trying to move towards him, it felt like everything was in slow motion. It felt like I couldn't get to him quick enough. And as soon as I got to his stoop, he pulled me in. And in the hallway, there was a group of people, families, kids, grandparents, and they were all in the stairway. And they were all crying. They were all shaking. They were holding each other. And then all of a sudden, their attention turned towards me. And then they started pointing at me. And then they started screaming. And I looked down, and half of my leg was blown off. And I blacked out. When I woke up, this community that often had a lot of conflicts with each other, that sometimes did not communicate well with each other, were working with each other to save my life. Right? I remember a lot of different languages being spoken around me. Right? But I laid there, and I remember this lady holding me down, and she was holding my leg, another person's holding my head, and there were people walking around me trying to figure things out, and the same Puerto Rican man was running all over the place and calling people and asking for things, and eventually he came back with a taxi driver. And that taxi driver came out, he looked at the situation, he started arguing with the group. Because what do you think he's arguing over? Who's gonna pay for this? Who's gonna clean up his taxi? So an argument happened between him and the group of people that was trying to save my life, and eventually the Puerto Rican man found some money, gave it to him, and we were off. And I blacked out. When I woke up, there was a young African-American, maybe teenager, sitting next to me. And he was holding his stomach. And he kept on saying, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Oh God, I can't breathe. Please, 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 please. When we got to the hospital, I found out that young man died next to me. Now, it took my mother almost a day and a half to find me, right? Because this is before cell phones. This is even before beepers, if you know what beepers are. Right? So it took her a while to find me. She went from one hospital to another, to another, to another, because she didn't have a car. She didn't have money for taxi. She had to take a train, and then she had to walk. She had to take a train, and then she had to walk. And then finally, when she found me, she told me there was no way we could survive in Brooklyn. There was no way I would survive in Brooklyn. So she made a decision to move us to Syracuse, New York. Now, I wish I could say that was a happy ending. But now you have a single mother away from her community, away from her resources, right, in upstate New York, in a smaller city that is dealing with other issues, that's dealing with other problems, where the racism that we knew existed kind of grew, right, where segregation was truly clear. Neighborhoods, not by boroughs, but neighborhoods. Right? Neighborhoods were split between the Irish, between the black community, between the Puerto Rican community, and here's this ambiguous looking kid, right? That always that people were confused. Like, I think he might be Puerto Rican and Chinese. No, I think he's like black and Vietnamese. So I was like that kid that can kind of jump over from one neighborhood to another. I was like a little chameleon, right? The crazy thing is being in this environment where lines are often drawn, right, between people's neighborhoods, ethnicity. I was that one kid that was able to play hopscotch, right, and got a chance to hear different stories and experience different coaches, to the point where back in high school, In 11th grade, there was a big fight that happened. And the school labeled it as a race riot because it was a fight between some Puerto Rican kids and some black kids. So they shut down the school because they were afraid that it was going to escalate to something bigger. And when we came back to school, they brought all the troublemakers, including myself, right? So they brought all the troublemakers into the auditorium. And they told us that they brought a bunch of conflict resolution experts, some mediators, to deal with the situation. And we were told that we had to report to the principal's office, and in the principal's office, on the wall, our names would be listed. And based on where our names was, that's the group that we would go to, I guess, get mediated, right? So, right, to deal with this conflict. So we all report to the principal's office, we get in line, and as soon as we get there, we could see that they split the groups between Puerto Rican kids and black kids. Now, as you know, I'm Cambodian, right? So as I'm walking towards this wall, where do you think they placed me? Anyone? Where do you think they placed me? Puerto Rican side or black side? Well, they put me on both sides. They had no idea what my ethnicity was. They didn't ask. They were like, you might be mixed, so we're gonna be fair here. We're gonna do some DEI, I guess, right? Before it was a thing. So they put me both on the Puerto Rican list and the black list, right? So I said, okay, I'll roll with it. So the first group was with the black kids. Came in there. I knew everybody. No one said I didn't belong, right? No one said he shouldn't be here. Instead, I was accepted, I was embraced, I got to hear the situation. That was done. Went to the other group. Same thing, the Puerto Rican kids like, come on in, right? Hola. I got accepted and I got embraced. Now, the great thing was I was the only one that got to hear both sides of the story. Even the mediators did not get a chance to hear both sides of the story. And I was part of their peers. I was not this authority figure that came into the school that the students didn't trust. So because I got to hear both sides of the story, I was also going back and forth and trying to deal with the situation, letting them know, hey, it was over a girl. Like most things over high school, right? Right? Somebody's girlfriend said this, and that person got upset, and it just escalated. So I was able to defuse the situation, right? And I was excited and I was happy that I was able to help this situation and deal with it. But a week later, I get called to my student advisors class. I was in 11th grade. I get called into her office, and she told me there was no way I was going to graduate high school. I had 2 years left. She said I was too far behind. I've been getting in too much trouble. There was no way I was going to graduate high school. I should pursue my GED. So I walked out of that classroom very upset, very angry, right? Because here's this teacher that gave up on me. Right? And I was ready to destroy this high school at that point. And Mr. Dardell, who was the vice principal, who was my Morgan Freeman, stepped in. He stepped in. He said he heard about my story, heard about the situation. He was willing to help me. And it was this man that put me in a program called OLC, Occupational Learning Center. We call it One Last Chance, right? And it was through this program where I spent half the day in a trade school and the rest of the day doing basic education stuff. And within a year and a half, I graduated high school, right? And that's how I ended up at a community college, because at my school, there was no other options. We didn't have a student advisor saying you should go to Syracuse University, which is only up the street from us. Instead, they told us we should look at a trade. We should look at community college. And so that was our only option. So here I was in Nicholas' classroom, drooling all over the place, trying to figure things out. And here's a man that looked down at me but looked at me and recognized me and said, let him sleep. I know his situation. He's here. That says a lot about him. He's here. He doesn't have to be here, but he's here. So I was so upset that I did this to Mr. Poulos, and I went looking for him. I found him at his office, and I was like, oh man, I apologize. I'm so sorry. And he goes, no, you don't need to apologize. But I need you to do me a favor. I need you to take a test. Now, I didn't ask what the test was, because I owed him a favor, right? I took that test. He asked me to take another test, and then another test, and then another test. And then one day he called me into his office. He goes, I got the results from the test. And he goes, Emad, I don't know if you know this, but do you know you're dyslexic? Now, I don't know what that means, but it sounds like a really bad disease. Sounds like, yeah, I know what that is. And in my head, I'm like, how did I catch this? Sounds nasty. So he goes, Emad, let me explain this to you. So he explained it to me, and I was like, oh, it's a learning disability. Well, I know I have a learning disability. I was in special ed. I was in the resource room. He goes, no, Emad, this is great news. You don't understand, this is great news. And I was like, how is this great news? You just told me I caught dyslexia. And he goes, Emad, no, this is amazing news. You could learn. Emad, you could learn. You just learned different, and no one knew that. You didn't know that. And now that we know that, I could help you. We could help you. So Mr. Poulos stepped in. He stepped in, he went to each class and explained to the teacher, said, Emad needs extra time for his test. Emad needs some evening options. Emad needs some one-on-one group opportunities. He needs some more advisement. And I became this D student, F student that was always struggling, that was on the cusp of dropping out, lost my EOP scholarship, was on academic probation, and within 6 months, I was a C, B student. C, B student. And you know what? This is how great this man was. One day he came to me and said, listen, Emad, I don't think community college is for you. We can only help you so much. And I was thinking he's trying to brush me off, right? He's just trying to get rid of me now, like the teacher did back in public school. And he goes, no, there's another college that works with adult students, right? It's Empire State College, a state school that works with adult students that can help people like you, and I'm gonna do everything I can to get you in there. So I ended up at Empire State College, and I started, now this is before the online revolution. I know we're talking about online revolution here. This is when what was called correspondence learning. You know that? It's when they mail you a VHS tape, and the professor looked like he's on a PBS special, right? It's like Mr. Rogers. He sits there and he talks about psychology, and you watch this 30-minute, this is revolution, right? And you watch this half-an-hour video and you write a paper on it. And if you're lucky, you get a cassette tape in the mail. And it's that same professor. This time he's talking on his microphone, breathing heavily, sounding like some Marvin Gaye, song, right? And you have to write an article on it. But this was my thing, because someone that's dyslexic, I control when I listen, when I watch, how I write. And I became this CB student to an A student, right? To an A student. And all of a sudden, this light bulb clicked. And from barely graduating high school to spending 4 years in a community college, it only took me 1.5 years to complete my associates. And then I went to get my bachelor's in another year. And oh my God, it felt like Kanye West's first album, and I loved it. I wanted more of it. It's like the Wu-Tang Clan opened up, right? And then it was like, what else can I do? And I pursued a master's, and then after that, another master's, and I got my project management certification, and everything started going fast forward, right? Then the online revolution took off. And in the online revolution, I had an option to pursue a doctorate, go to a traditional school that did not embrace me, that did not understand me, that did not accept me, or go to a program that was hybrid. I got accepted to Case Western University. I got accepted to Syracuse University. I ended up going to Colorado Tech. And within 3 years, I earned my doctorate, right? 3 years, not 5 years, not 10 years, 3 years. And after 3 years of earning my doctorate, I got my postdoc at Tulane. I went to Harvard, did another postdoc. I got an honorary doctorate from another school. I became a dean at 34, and another dean, and another dean. And I started building online courses and programs for multiple universities, traveling the world doing this thing. I became a Fulbright scholar. So my thing with you, what you do here means everything to someone like me. It means the world to me, because I would not be here if it wasn't for the technology, if it wasn't for the innovation, if it wasn't for the creativity, if it wasn't for stepping outside the academic ivory tower and giving someone a chance like me. Thank you very much, everybody.